Does the Liberal Party have a woman problem? One activist journalist in Sydney is on a crusade to tell us that they do. Now, I actually agree that the Liberal Party has a woman problem, but it's not what you think. And that's today on the Dr. Joe Show. So before we get started, could I please ask you to hit the subscribe button? The more people that subscribe, the bigger our channel grows. And if you are a returning viewer, thank you for coming back, and please make sure you've hit the notification bell. So let me introduce you to Alexandra Smith, 9 News Journo, although I really hate using that word when they're really just activists. She's the state political editor for the Sydney Morning Herald. So before you get impressed by that, spoiler alert, she's just another activist, left-wing journalist on a mission. The first time I came across Alexandra is actually during the debate on the Greens abortion bill in New South Wales. She failed to publish any article about the bill, about the extraordinary power in this, world-first bill that would have given the Minister for Health the power to compel publicly funded hospitals to force them to perform abortions. She didn't write a single article about this extraordinary bill. And in fact, the first article she wrote was a hit piece on Chris Rath, who spoke against the bill. And the second article she wrote was a hit piece on me. But prior to that, she hadn't written about this extraordinary bill. She hadn't covered the fact that the Coalition for Religious Freedom and Conscience had over 15 organisations, Catholic, Christian, Muslim, all different organisations who were really against the bill and had written a letter to the Premier. None of that in there at all. Nothing on the 2 rallies, the fact that there'd been the first rally with 5,000, the second rally which shut down Macquarie Street and had 10,000 people. None of that from the state political editor for the Sydney Morning Herald. Nothing there on that from her. No, the first was a hit piece about Chris Rath, who spoke against the bill. The second, which was against me. And so naturally I paid even more attention because it was an article about me, made me sit up. But it was the one where she boldly proclaimed that Mark Speakman had given a powerful speech in the Parliament standing up to the brazen bullying of anti-abortion campaigner Dr. Joanna Howe. When I woke up to this hit piece the morning after the debate in the Parliament, I knew exactly what game Alexandra Smith was playing. I've seen this before from journo activists like Tory Shepherd, where they use the parliamentary privilege, the statements that pro-abortion MPs make in the Parliament under parliamentary privilege, and then they repeat them verbatim using quotation marks so that they don't get sued because they're just reporting on something that happened in the Parliament. That's their plausible deniability. That's their excuse. It's their cover. And they put that in the media to try and take someone out. It's happened to me countless times. So I knew what game she was playing when I woke up to her saying Mark Speakman had given a powerful speech and he'd been brazenly bullied by me. So here we have a so-called journalist who's obviously very closely aligned with the radical left of the Liberal Party, so much so that she was prepared to write an article taking out Chris Rath. No other media outlet had even gone near that because it wasn't a news story. No Jewish group had even come out to say, how could he compare this to Nazi Germany? No one had raised that, and her article doesn't either. In fact, there's no voice in it other than a radical left MP criticising Rath, which is not a story. But for Alexandra Smith, you don't need a story to publish a hit piece, as we'll soon find out. But then what's really embarrassing for our friend Alexandra Smith is the fact that she calls Speakman's speech powerful when, in fact, there never has been and probably never will be a more pathetic display than Mark Speakman claiming to have been bullied by a 5-foot woman from Adelaide who's got 5 kids because she threatened to run a political campaign against him if he voted a certain way. I mean, that's just democracy. That's just politics. Everybody knows it. And yet here's the state political editor of the Sydney Morning Herald lauding him for his powerful speech. Before our friend Alexandra, she is not going to let the truth get in the way of a good story. She's the political editor for the Sydney Morning Herald, one of the biggest syndicated platforms across the country. She's got a megaphone and she uses it, and she certainly used it to try and take me out. Publishing the story before even getting comment from me. I was about to board a plane to Brisbane because I was taking a few days off. I didn't know what media storm was going to engulf me, but I'd campaigned against the Greens bill. It was about to pass the Parliament. I was going to Brisbane with my kids because they were competing in a national rock climbing competition, something they work very hard for. But just before I left, Adelaide, this article had dropped, so I published this video to the internet where I just said, look, this is ridiculous. It's not bullying. I'll let you guys make up your own mind. I'll publish the email. And really, Mark Speakman needs to grow a set. And so when I landed in Brisbane, Because maybe Alexandra Smith had thought I'd just take this lying down, and she clearly doesn't know me if that's what she thought. But my response really kind of exposed her. It showed her up, it showed Speakman up. It's like, well, how pathetic is this? So, of course, the minute I land, I've got this text message from her, because she really does need to show my side of the story now, doesn't she? And she writes, "Hi, Joanna, it's Alex Smith from the SMH. Tried contacting you through your online form, but then found your number. Do you want to comment on Min Speakman's take on your campaign?" Totally disingenuous text message there from her. Now, you might not read that. You might just think, oh, well, that's very innocuous. She doesn't, she's tried to contact you through your online form. But let me just tell you something. If you're the state political editor and you're writing an article character assassinating someone, you actually have an ethical obligation to contact that person and get comment from them. Journalists don't use online forms. They get phone numbers, and they know how to get phone numbers. And if she'd wanted to contact me, like if she'd wanted to write the hit piece and actually tell my side of the story too, then she would have got in contact with me. But no, what she wanted to do was take me out. And when I didn't take it lying down, she then had an obligation really to put me in the story, because she was now copping flack for calling a pathetic speech powerful. So she really needed that comment. So then I get that text message, and I text her back and say, look, just getting off the plane, I'll call you in 15. And I call Alexandra Smith, never having spoken to her before, not really knowing her from above, but assuming that she's in the mould of Tori Shepherd, an activist pretending to be a journalist, just because of the story that she'd written. But when when I speak to her, she picks up and she's like, "Oh, Joanna, thanks so much for taking the call." She's one of those people with a sing-song voice, and she's like, "I'm just trying to understand, what your perspective is on this, like what you were thinking in writing that email to Mark Speakman threatening him." And I just said to her, "Well, Alex, why do you think it was threatening to suggest that I'd run a political campaign against Mark Speakman?" And she's like, "Oh, that's not for me to say. I'm just a journalist, and I want to know why you think what you were thinking." And so I said to her, "Well, Alex, this was a bill that turns nurses and midwives into abortionists. I've been contacted by many health workers saying, we really don't want this bill to pass. It will make it very difficult for us in our workplaces. Abortion is legal up to birth in New South Wales already." She interrupts me. She's like, "Oh, no, Joanna, I'm not interested in getting into the culture wars." At that point, I was like, oh, this woman not only has this really annoying sing-song voice that is so frustrating, but she's not into the culture wars, which is this term of derision, in case you are unaware, have been sleeping under a rock for the last decade. The culture wars is a term of derision that someone on the left uses when anyone who is opposed to a radical left agenda dares bring up a point of criticism about their radical left agenda. So in this case, because I dared to bring up the fact that abortion up to birth is legal in New South Wales, and that's just a really inconvenient truth for someone like Alexandra Smith, she just doesn't want to hear that, doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to know why nurses and midwives are ringing me in tears, really upset about the fact that the New South Wales Parliament is about to pass this bill. She's really not interested in that and never going to report that. So she says she's not interested in the culture wars, but it turns out that's exactly what she's interested in, because after amending her brazen bullying story with a little, footnote at the end about some comments from me, she then writes an opinion piece which lays her cards out and clearly exposes who she is. And, I've spoken to another state political editor from another paper and who has said to me that they prefer never to write opinion pieces now, because it just discredits their entire reporting when they're writing opinion pieces. Because here's Alexandra Smith pretending to be a news reporter. She's a state political editor. And so she's writing critiques of what's going on in Parliament. She's writing news articles about how Mark Speakman's been brazenly bullied. But then that's what she's doing on the one hand, being a news reporter, but then she writes an opinion piece which clearly exposes the side that she's on. It clearly exposes the normative position she takes on this. And so moments after writing the hit piece masquerading as a news article, she writes another hit piece, this time as an opinion writer. And this is what she says. She says, how anti-abortion influencers' MAGA-style campaign fell flat. It starts with, a nasty display of bully boy political tactics have been laid bare in New South Wales Parliament this week. There have been claims of threats, misinformation, and in the words of Premier Chris Minns, downright lies. But none has been instigated by Labor, the Liberals, or any other party. Rather, it has been led by anti-abortion influencer Joanna Howe, who has managed to unite both sides of the political divide. Howe is a Rhodes Scholar and a law academic from the University of South Australia who has been accused of trying to emulate America's bitter debate over women's reproductive rights. She is injecting a Trump style of politics into New South Wales as she rallies against changes to existing abortion laws. People who have disagreed with her hardline approach have been labelled pro-abortion. So right away, we can see what side she's on because she's using the language of the left. When she talks about abortion, she's talking about it as reproductive rights. So that clearly tells us that she believes a woman should have a right to have an abortion, to kill her baby, full stop. That's the side this journalist, this activist, comes from. That's the side, that's the culture warrior she is. She's fighting for a culture because she really is in the culture wars, but her culture that she wants is a culture where innocent human beings, vulnerable victims of abortion, we whitewash and cover up what happens to them because women have reproductive rights. She also uses all of those leftist buzzwords, that Trump is bad, that injecting a Trump style of politics means you're a very, very bad person. Never mind the fact that it was actually enormously successful in destroying Kamala Harris and the Democrats in the last election, and the fact that he's actually the democratically elected president of the US, one of Australia's closest allies. But these left-wing activists, they use the criticism that you've injected a Trump style of politics as if it's like a really bad thing when, America is actually a democracy. Like, it would be a really big insult, I think, if you said she's injected a Putin-style politics or a Mao-style politics or like a North Korean approach to political campaigning. That would be, I think, problematic because they were like actually really authoritarian, dictatorial type states. Whereas, when someone says, oh, well, she's injected a Trump style of politics, it's like, well, okay, so he had a different style to what Alexandra Smith would like. He passed an executive order on like day one saying there's only two genders. Now that would be something she'd probably struggle with. But it doesn't mean that the style of politics is bad, but that's like the biggest insult they can throw. And the irony of all of this is that she goes out with this like big bombastic headline, how anti-abortion's MAGA-style campaign fell flat. And the article supports that headline, her thesis that, the tactics that I used in activating and energising the community was actually really counterproductive and bad. And then she even says at the end that, Dutton ran a MAGA-style campaign and that's why he lost. I mean, no one believes that. Like, this just makes no sense. Like, Dutton is one of the most spineless, limp liberals that we have. He didn't run a MAGA-style campaign. He wasn't anything close to Trump. I've done countless videos on that. But the thing is, the irony of all of this is that we were actually enormously successful. This Radical Greens abortion bill was introduced by Amanda Conn with the support of the Health Minister, Ryan Parks, for Labor, with the support of the shadow Liberal Health Minister. So, there was like bipartisan political support for this Radical Greens abortion bill. Chris Minns even prioritised it and gave it government time to ram it through. The thing is, this was a bill that should have passed unamended. That's what they all thought would happen. They had the press in the bag. They had the parliament locked down. This was a bill that was going to pass. The only reason it stopped is because we ran, in her words, a MAGA-style campaign, and we actually told the people what was going on, and the people rose up. So all of this is actually really laughable because the egg's on Alexandra Smith's face. She clearly doesn't know what she's talking about because she lives in like some left-wing bubble where they just echo each other and they support each other and they just don't actually know what ordinary people are thinking. But the people of New South Wales were against this bill. And the Labor MPs, the backbenchers, they knew it, which is why Labor amended this bill so heavily in the Legislative Council. It's why we gutted 90% of it, and Penny Sharp, who's the most pro-abortion Labor MP, was sitting on the opposite side of the chamber to Rose Jackson, who's also an equally pro-abortion Labor MP. They were on opposite sides because the Labor Party did a secret deal at the very end because our campaign was so successful. Because we had, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott talk at our rally, because we had 6 bishops talk at our rally, because we'd done over 10 letterboxing campaigns in Labor-held marginal seats. It's precisely because we ran a Trump-style campaign that we gutted that bill and we were successful. But, Alexandra Smith, she's using her megaphone to just embarrass herself once again. She embarrasses herself first up by saying that Mark Speakman is powerful, and then she embarrasses herself again when she says that our campaign fell flat. And word to the wise, Alexandra Smith, calling me Trumpian, it's not an insult. It's not going to make me quiver and crawl into some hole and then just start apologising profusely for being such a bully. I'll just read you, in fact, what I wrote on Twitter in response, which had a really huge response. I wrote, you've hit a nerve when the Premier and opposition leader unite to call you a liar and a bully, and the pro-abortion media establishment calls you Trump. Here's the thing, though, guys. I'm never going away. See, and you may be shocked by this, it's actually legal in Australia to campaign against a politician or a political party. So until you change the law to reflect your authoritarian taste and incarcerate me, I'm going to keep threatening politicians with political campaigns. You don't have to like it, but you would do well to get used to it. Meanwhile, let's not forget, Trump won. But our friend Alexandra Smith is not done. She's on a campaign to make the Liberal Party more left-wing. So she published a hit piece just a few days ago entitled, How to Annoy Liberal Women, Tell Them They Are Sufficiently Assertive. Now, this is an opinion piece, again, sort of masquerading as a news article. And of course, once she publishes it, it gets picked up by other left-wing media because this is how they do the hit. Somebody goes out with a story and then the rest of the left-wing media establishment picks it up. And so she writes, let me just read you the beginning because I was particularly offended by this bit. I thought this was gross. She writes, with the Liberal Party's founding father looming over their shoulder, quite literally, two octogenarian men from Victoria thought it wise to lecture women on the future of the New South Wales Party. Women are now sufficiently assertive in the Liberal Party. Ex-Victorian Treasurer Alan Stockdale bemoaned that it is probably time to start giving blokes a leg up. Stockdale and former Victorian Senator Richard Alston, combined age 164, positioned themselves under a portrait of Robert Menzies as they fronted the New South Wales Liberal Women's Council on Tuesday night to argue why they should continue to run the troubled division. Now, before I get into the bones of what this is actually about, I just found it gross that she was so ageist in this. Anyone who has anyone elderly in their life, like a grandparent or a loved one, it's just really gross that she's two octogenarian men, combined age 164. I mean, this is just blatant ageism and just disrespect. It's just dehumanization of older people. They're old, they've got a combined age of 164, they shouldn't be allowed to talk. So not only is there casual ageism and sexism there, let's just get into the bones of what's really going on. So the New South Wales Liberal Party division has been in such a mess. It's been controlled by the left. Now, I want to just give you a quick explainer because they call themselves the moderates as if they're moderate. There's nothing moderate about these guys. They are as aligned with the Greens and the radical left of the Labor Party as anyone. So when you hear the words moderates used, just know that's the radical left faction in the Liberal Party. Now, in New South Wales, there's two more factions. There's the centre-right faction. Again, I'm not sure how accurate these names are. That's run by Alex Hawke. And then there's called the hard right faction. And that's seen as the people that are socially conservative who are against abortion and against euthanasia. People like Damien Tudhope, Dom Perrottet, Tanya Davies, Anthony Roberts. Now, I don't like any of these names because I actually don't think that they're accurate. The moderates are really radical lefties. The people they call hard right, well, I actually think they're just people that are conservative. So they have conservative traditional values that actually reflect the vast majority of Australians. You wouldn't believe it reading the press because they are part of the radical left media establishment like Alexandra Smith. But that is just the reality of it. Now, this thing that's happened in New South Wales is before the last federal election, the Liberal Party in New South Wales was such a mess, there was so much fighting, the left was controlling it, that headquarters, HQ, I think Peter Dutton, they sent 3 people to kind of oversee what was going on, to control what was going on and to do a big review. And so 2 of the 3 were men. One was Richard Alston, the other was Alan Stockdale. So these are the 2 people that Alex Smith has in her sights on this hit piece. And of course, Alexandra Smith is on the side of the radical left in the Liberal Party. That's where she gets all of her sources from. That's where all her stories are coming from. They're the people that want to take me out, for example. But that's the side that she's on. And so this hit piece is about the fact that at a virtual meeting, so on Zoom, Stockdale was asked about whether the Liberal Party needed quotas for women, and he said, women are sufficiently assertive now that we should be giving some thought to whether we need to protect men's involvement. Alex Smith writes, great idea, reverse quotas for men. If it were not so ludicrous and offensive, it would be comical. She then goes on to write, Charlotte Mortlock, a former journalist and Liberal staffer who founded Hilmer's Network, which supports women for Liberal preselection, last month launched a petition calling on the party to establish gender quotas. Women in the party and across the country more broadly have been demanding the Liberal Party improve its female representation for decades, Mortlock wrote. We have failed to act. As of Wednesday, the petition had 449 signatures. So it's hardly taking off, this petition by Charlotte Mortlock. And this is one of the key allies of Alexandra Smith. Mortlock's always writing in the Sydney Morning Herald opinion pieces. They're always commissioning her to write these radically left opinion pieces. But she's one of the Liberal women on the left of the party who is trying to get them to introduce quotas. Now, the thing that I notice about these radical left people is that they often move with the zeitgeist and with the wind, right? So let's just take a little trip down memory lane and see what Charlotte Mortlock was saying just even 3 years ago. So right now she's campaigning aggressively for petitions. She's even, trying to lobby Stockdale in the Zoom meeting about it. But let's just take a look because, she's so passionate about it now. You would assume that she was equally passionate about this 3 years ago.
I'm not pro-quotas. I do not want quotas.
So that was 3 years ago. Now she's doing this petition. Let's look at what she says.
I'm not, calling for quotas. I'm demanding quotas at this point. I'm channeling some of the entitlement we see of some of our Liberal males who consistently ignore what needs to occur for this party to evolve.
So Charlotte Mortlock exemplifies this radical left female dominant faction in the Libs, this so-called moderates that Alexandra Smith loves. And they're really pushing aggressively for quotas because they say that the Liberal Party has a women problem. Let's think critically about what a quota actually is. Quotas are run on discrimination. What they do is carve out what is deemed to be an overrepresented group. What the left says is represented too much. And so in this case, in the Liberal Party, they say it's like white old men. And so we need quotas to make sure that, bright young women like Charlotte Mortlock are able to enter the party. Another way of saying that is that we should actually discriminate against men so that they're not able to be represented in the parliament, because we're having a quota which advantages women. The reality about a quota system is that it's not a meritocracy, is it? That we don't have the best person chosen for preselection because we are using an artificial metric, a quota, to say that even if the female candidate is not as good, not as qualified, not as experienced, we're going to leapfrog them above the male candidate because of our quota system. And the Labor Party's had quotas for years. We've actually seen many good male candidates not be pre-selected because of the quota system. Quotas aren't actually in the best interests of the country. They're not in the best interests of the Liberal Party. I mean, I think people know this intuitively. They're sort of starting to see this through this from the left because, Charlotte Mortlock's petition, it's got 449 signatures. She can't even get 500 on it, so it's her and all of her lefty friends, when in reality the Liberal Party should be representing ordinary working families, not like rich women from the North Shore or the eastern suburbs, Like the Liberal Party, like any political party, is there to serve the constituents, to serve the Australian people. And if you have quotas, then what you're essentially doing is picking not necessarily the best qualified person to represent constituents because you're leapfrogging someone else ahead. And so that's not in the best interests of the people. If you think about it, the reason Australians voted so overwhelmingly against the Voice is they just didn't want a system where there was a separate, parliamentary mechanism for Indigenous people. They thought we're one country, and it was that division that really kind of made a lot of Australians irate. Similar thing with quotas, this left-wing attempt at division between men and women. And so, on that Zoom meeting, when this question was put to Alan Stockdale, he answered it the best he knew how. But, it wasn't worthy of a hit piece, but that is exactly what the left wing of the Liberals working with Alex Smith are trying to do. They're trying to get rid of this takeover that's currently existing. They want it to go back to Don Harwin, who ran the left and ran the Liberal Party before this takeover. And so that's the campaign that Alex Smith is on with this article. She goes on to write in the hit piece, because actually I get a mention, so I thought I'd share that with you. It's kind of fun. She wrote, at least 3 sources on the call, this is the Zoom call, confirmed that moderate power broker Senator Maria Kovacic asked Stockdale if he would make a public statement backing the New South Wales Liberal leader Mark Speakman in light of extraordinary comments made by anti-abortion influencer Joanna Howe. Howe has used her YouTube channel to describe Speakman as the weakest, most pathetic, lamest man in the country after he refused to buckle to her demands and vote against a recent bill to expand abortion access. She has gone further, and according to a recent episode of her podcast, The Dr. Joe Show, she wants to branch stack the New South Wales Liberals to gain enough opposition to Speakman to have him rolled as leader. So, pretty good that she's watching The Dr. Joe Show. Alex, if you're here, hello. Nice to have you back. Hopefully you've subscribed. But in all seriousness, Maria Kovacic, you guys probably don't remember who she is, so let me quickly refresh your memory. Maria Kovacic is the leftist Liberal who, when a motion was in the federal parliament last year, Senator Babet put an urgency motion forward and he said, in Australia, 1 baby a week survives their abortion and is left to die in a state without medical care. And he wanted to just pass a motion, not even a law, just a motion recognising the human rights of these babies. Maria Kovacic, she's not from the Greens, she's not from Labor Left, she's from the Liberal Party. She stands up and says, this is not a black and white issue and I will not be supporting the urgency motion. She literally gave that speech. And so after that, we ran a campaign against her. They got a lot of signatures and there were motions being passed in the Liberal Party in New South Wales against her, because it was just so disgraceful that she would give that speech and vote against a motion that simply wanted to recognise that if a baby survives their abortion and is living and writhing and struggling to breathe, that they're a human being who should be recognised under the law. That was all the motion said. And Maria Kovacic is so much of a card-carrying pro-abortion leftist that she not only voted against it, she got up and spoke against that motion. So, when Maria Kovacic seizes her moment on a Zoom call, this is, Alex Smith thinks this is very newsworthy. It's hardly surprising that she says to Alan Stockdale, are you going to back Speakman and not support this extraordinary campaign by Joanna Howe against him? So, look, Alex Smith is clearly someone that just has a hotline to the leftist Liberals. So to bring this all together, does the Liberal Party have a woman problem? Alex Smith thinks it does. But this is the actual problem that the Liberal Party faces. The problem is that the Liberal Party is controlled by radical leftist women who shouldn't be in the Liberal Party, they should be in the Greens. So people like Kelly Sloan, Felicity Wilson, Maria Kovacic, Natalie Ward, Jackie Munro in New South Wales, even Susan Ley, who's pro-abortion and hasn't been able to say that there are 2 genders. Right from the top, the Liberal Party has a sickness with radical leftist women who really shouldn't be in that party. And that's the women problem that the Liberal Party faces, not that you'll hear that from our friend Alexandra Smith. So guys, thank you so much for watching this episode and also for supporting the show. I wanted to let you know that from now on I'll be shifting to 4 episodes a week. Last week I came back to work after a lovely period of long service leave. It was such a blessing to have a couple of months there, especially while the New South Wales campaign was going on and while we were starting the Daily Show, to be able to have long service leave, because it just made it so much easier to be able to spend so much time doing all of this. Now that I am back at work, I think realistically I'm only going to be able to do 4 of these episodes a week. So I'm sorry that it's not going to be 5 days a week. I will try and throw in an extra one when I can, but I think for now, just in order for this to be sustainable, it's probably going to be 4 days a week. Thank you so much for the support you guys have been giving me. I'm really grateful for all of your comments, and I do read them, and I really appreciate the ideas in there and the encouragement that you guys give me, and I think about the points of critique that you make, and I also appreciate how you guys are forwarding the clips on and sending them, so encouraging others to subscribe, and I'm very grateful for that you're helping through word of mouth to make this a bigger podcast. So thank you so much, and yeah, that's today on the Dr. Joe Show.